And now Gary Gallagher, who's appearing on screen with me, who's a Vice President of Sales at TSO Life, is going to introduce the session for us today. So I'll hand over to Gary to do that now. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Leah, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining from. Our first webinar this week is going to be focused on building and executing an IT roadmap and strategy. And I'm pleased to introduce our two presenters for today, Doug Leidig, CEO at Asbury Communities, and Nick Patel, President at ThriveWell Tech. Now, Doug has been with Asbury Communities for nearly 20 years and has worked his way through the organization from community leader to president and now chief executive officer, a role he's held since 2015. In leading one of the largest multi-site not-for-profit senior living organizations in the nation, he has led a revamp of Asbury's culture, one that has earned national recognition as a best workplace, and assembled a new executive team built of leaders with diverse professional backgrounds. Doug is leading a collaborative effort with leadership in the board in evolving Asbury Communities from a continuing care retirement community focus system into a diversified aging services organization, while achieving provider of choice and employer of choice status in the marketplace and in increasing the financial strength of the organization. This plan includes smart growth and expanding Asbury's mission to serve more, while deliberately right-sizing and strategically restructuring debt to enhance the strength of the system. Additionally, he serves on multiple external boards and is passionate about transforming the way society views aging. He is committed to leveraging technology to drive innovation as Asbury does business in new ways. Now on to Nick. Nick is the president of ThriveWell Tech, a consulting arm of Asbury Communities. Nick has more than 15 years of experience in strategic planning, finance, operations, and sales management in both domestic and international markets, including Fortune 500 companies. Nick is responsible for business growth, as well as the strategic planning and execution of technology, hardware, and software initiatives and programs. Nick received his bachelor's degree in management from England's University of Manchester School of Business, and he is a certified public accountant. Thank you. Y'all have a great day, and over to you, Doug and Nick.
Thank you, Gary. So I'm going to open up our slides. Hopefully you can all see the slides. This is just a session summary today. We're going to go through basically a detailed walkthrough of our journey of really how Doug has led a business strategy and how the ThriveWell group has overlaid technology strategy to make the business strategy successful. And we're going to really go into detail around the components that we've orchestrated together as a management team.
So again, I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for spending some time with Nick and I as we share our journey of aligning the strategies between our various business organizations. Our focus was to build a strong technology strategy that keeps our business relevant in the future, as well as meeting our day-to-day needs across an expanding organization. We're going to share, a lot of our lessons learned through this process, the amount of time it has taken to get us to where we are today, and the benefits we're finally seeing after all the hard work that has been done over the years.
Yeah, so the main fundamental concepts for our session today, really they stem around how we govern and we look at the strategy for senior living as well as an overlay of IT, how we developed a complementary technology strategy that really accelerated the business strategy. And as you look at the two, how the two strategies were executed and delivered to the desired value. So we're quite a way through our journey, but this is what the session should give you as an outcome. I'm going to hand over to Doug to introduce Asbury.
Yep. So thanks. This is a good snapshot of who we are today. I'm proud to announce that in 5 years, we're going to be 100 years old as an organization. Currently, we're the nation's 16th largest not-for-profit senior living organization, with about 2,800 associates serving around 4,300 older adults. We're really working on, as you heard earlier, about redefining the expectations of aging from those we serve from senior living communities to home and community-based services and more. The picture also speaks to a little bit of the complexity that we've had in integrating and aligning our business and IT strategies. As you can see through the timeline, we've grown in multiple steps. Starting, we were born in 1926, but then we hit some growth spurts in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then in 2016, we aligned with a system in Tennessee. And most recently, right before the pandemic hit, we affiliated with another system in Pennsylvania. And so now what we're doing is we're shifting our system strategy to becoming a diversified aging services organization, where all business lines reach across about 20 different locations over multiple states. And you'll see that we're creating a home and community-based services division, which has home care and home health. We have a pharmacy. We have our own therapy company now that we've started. We have life centers, which are all-inclusive care for the elderly. And we also have, most recently, ThriveWell Tech, which I'll let Nick talk a little bit about.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, very exciting. We relaunched and re-engineered the IT arm of Asbury Communities, where we are a 20-year-old company. However, over the last 3 years, we've really focused in on aligning the service offering to be very complementary to senior living. March 1st was our relaunch of the formerly known company, the Asbury Group Integrated Technologies, to what you see today as ThriveWell Tech. A lot of work went into creating the footprint we have today. As you know, technology moves very rapidly, and we've seen over the last 5 years exponential changes in what can be done using technology. We've always been great partners to the senior living industry. However, over the past 2 to 3 years, what I can walk you through today around ThriveWell Tech specifically is the alignment that we've made quite deep rooted in the operations of senior living and the ancillary services that Doug mentioned. So as we talk about senior living, we also look at the ancillary businesses that we serve: PACE centers, physical therapy, home health, home care, pharmacy, foundations, and they're all unique. So we've spent a lot of time understanding the IT needs, and we're going to walk you through kind of the maturity model that we've been going through with Asbury as well as other customers. And when we relaunched, really it was a recalibration of future-proofing what you would need to do and what type of partnership you'd need to have on the IT side. And hopefully we've created a service offering that will really accelerate business growth for all our partners.
And one of the things we understood, that in order to do that, we really had to coalesce and align as an organization around the definition of strategy. We knew that in order for us to evolve and move forward, we all had to sort of had the same concept and understanding. And we all agreed that a good strategy provides a clear roadmap for the future. But most importantly, what we all understood, it creates a set of guiding principles or rules that defines the actions people will take in the various business lines when making various business decisions and prioritizing resources. That second part is really critical, because when you don't have that alignment, when you're talking multiple business lines, as a system, as an organization, we were not going to be able to move forward. And we knew that this is going to be how we achieve good business outcomes, when everyone was aligned and was having the same definition. Let me get the next one there for me, Nick, please. So our strategy today is this. It's when I became CEO six years ago, I was tasked to build a new strategy for the future, trying to think 5 to 7 years ahead of where we were today. An important part of that process was that we were to no longer think of ourselves as just a CCRC, continuing care retirement community business, but also how do we integrate IT into the plan, and what role do they play moving forward in helping us achieve our strategy? And we went through a long process to determine what our strategic plan image should look like. And visually, we landed on a triangle. Traditionally, in the past, we did a lot of circles in our organization, and we had a tendency for several years to be very stagnant. So the triangle really represents growth. It's strong, it points upwards, shows upwards mobility. But what's important are the three strategic initiatives you see: the provider of choice, the employer of choice, and financial strength. People sometimes assume that right away that because financial strength is on the bottom, everything is around financial strength. That's not really the case, because oftentimes we flip this triangle so it could be employer of choice or provider of choice, because all three are so interrelated on each other. Because we know that if you're not the provider of choice, if people aren't coming into your campuses, if they're not buying your services, you can't have financial strength, and you can't be an employer of choice if you don't have financial strength to support the needs and for benefits and pay, living wages, etc. So we defined the three strategic initiatives. The provider of choice is at the root of what we were. And that's that continuing care retirement community. That's the sacred work we do. That's taking care of those who live on our campuses, providing quality of care. But the other part of that is expanded a little bit in terms of what we wanted to do is position Asbury's, that we knew that a lot of individuals, organizations outside our industry were coming into senior living. They recognized the future population. They know that there's financial opportunities for them. So what I wanted to do is position Asbury so that when somebody came in and maybe it's an IT company saying, talking to the financial institutions that work with senior living, hey, who's innovating? Who's thinking differently? That we can start talking to about innovation, and we can talk about collaboration and partners. I wanted Asbury's name to bubble to the top. Employer choice was certainly is a significant strategic initiative. We all understand the workforce challenges we have, not only today, but as you look out another 5, 10, 15 years, we need to make sure that we were becoming the employer of choice. So people wanted to come work for us. Senior living often has been not necessarily the stepchild, but not the first choice of a lot of individuals, especially coming out of college. They don't think of senior living. We wanted to really position ourselves so people were thinking of us as a great place to work. And then ultimately financial strength. We knew that whatever we had to do had to build financial strength. But part of that financial strength was also the strategic investing in certain business areas where we could enhance our organization. So we also knew that, so when we successfully fulfill all three strategic initiatives, our goal is to have positioned all our communities as a high quality, competitively priced provider in all our market areas.
Thanks, Doug. So I'm going to layer on top of what Doug just described as really what we look at as Asbury's business strategy. And each of those components, as you can imagine, when Doug talked about workforce or employer of choice, our workforce here at Asbury is around 2,500 strong. So that's quite a complex ocean of workflows, technology, challenges, and mobilization using technology. So what you're seeing here is really the maturity model that we've overlaid on each of the areas that Doug walked through in his business strategy. But at its core, this is a very kind of generic model that we've been able to use this model for all senior living organizations. But what we're going to walk through today is specifically how we've taken the slices of this pyramid and used them to really strengthen the overall business strategy that Asbury's striving for. As you see, financial strength, we did early on, starting in 18, we did a very large infrastructure rehaul, modernizing and future-proofing all campuses, and how really Asbury can operate from a network, Wi-Fi connectivity, cybersecurity layer, and basically infrastructure to support the layers above the core applications. We see this as a very strong financial investment that's similar to plant, or if you look at buildings, you have to maintain. And if you let that maintenance lapse, the catch-up investments are quite large. So today we're very fortunate to say Asbury's back on a very maintained schedule. We've implemented technology that we can keep upgrading and modernizing. However, the investments are behind us in terms of the large lift it takes to bring a system forward from an infrastructure perspective. And now we're looking really at the next phase. So for instance, in this arena, we spent quite a lot of money investing in wired networks, networks that take us back to public cloud and private cloud. The next leap we're seeing is probably, it's on our doorstep, but we're seeing 5G technology will take us out of that hardwired framework. But we've already started experimenting in that arena to see when the cutover can be. That could be a next phase where the last investment, is past renewal, we'd move to a new technology, but that's part of staying current. If we look at provider of choice, really what we're empowering here is mobilizing the workforce to have the right tools, right technology in order for them to do their jobs and serve the residents that we have to their best capacity. We have a very complex web of applications that makes up a system of this size. And even when we look at smaller senior living operators, there's still a lot of complexity around how to integrate systems, how data should flow between systems. So we see this core application layer really solving it, creating a great end user experience for the associates, really allows them to do a much better job as they're doing the day-to-day activities in the campus. Life safety, working conditions, we also see that as a really key area around, specifically around SNF. We did a lot of work on the EMR side, making sure we've created environments where our HIPAA data and our EMR is very strategically aligned to allow us to move. If you look further up in the pyramid, what we're seeing now is emerging technologies. So to recap on what we're seeing on this slide, really, if your bottom layer hasn't been established correctly and investment hasn't been made, the core application layer, and then if you move up to life safety, allows you to really provide a good environment for residents, you will struggle because infrastructure you need won't give you a good end user experience. So we've made really good headway in this journey over the last 24 months. And we're now seeing the benefits of really putting some of this stuff into maintenance mode, where systems are doing what they need to do on networks that are very stable. That's allowing us to really now focus for Asbury specifically on emerging technology.
So similar to having how important it is to have the right infrastructure to build the IT strategy, you know that you have to have the right culture. So no matter what we intended to do, how great our strategy is or where it was leading us, we could not do our best without having the right culture, as Mr. Drucker says. So as I shared earlier, we're almost a 100-year-old organization. And with that comes a strong culture of being a continuing care retirement community system, who we've been for almost the last 90 plus years. So not one that offers other services. Our mindset was not thinking differently beyond the walls of our CCRCs. And I knew we had to change this, and we have been spending the last few years really trying to be focused on this and very purposeful in changing the culture of the organization. It was almost impossible for me to rally the system around IT, around innovation, around growth, around the world of possibilities when you talk about IT, because at times we had trouble focusing on just getting the trains running, and people were so focused in their own silos. I knew we had to run parallel tracks to improve the way we do business in order to move forward. We had to create that dual mindset. And I will tell you, in leading an organization, this was extremely difficult. It caused a lot of frustration throughout the system with managers and with line level associates because of those competing interests almost at the time, because that's not what they were seeing, because people had a need for the day-to-day, but yet I'm asking everybody to think about data, think about innovation, think about integration. And when you come to budgeting and allocating resources, not only financial, but personnel, it was a real struggle because everybody had their own competing interests. So, but I was committed to do this. And I knew that if we waited for one or the other to be fixed, we would be left behind because one, we know IT evolves and changes every day, that we will never be caught up. But I also knew that at the same time, we had to fix what was happening on the ground. So we really chose the path of parallel tracks. And it took a lot of resolve and commitment by a lot of leaders in the organization to get us there, which is where we are today. So one of the things when I talk about culture, people ask me, well, how do you describe the culture? And really, this is the philosophy we do when we come about and talk about our culture. And it's really, I call it lead, because this was one of the questions I was asked early on when I became CEO. How are you going to move the organization forward? So L is listening to those closest to the process. I know, and I think everybody on the session knows, that really to change the way you do business and to make improvements, you have to ask those closest to the process, those who are working in it day in and day out. And I think this really goes back to the roots of who I am. When I was 16, I was a nursing assistant, and I've worked in every possible position in this organization, in this industry. And I know how important that is, because that's where you truly find the way to do things better. So we have to go out and we have to listen to those closest to the process. We have to ask them what's going on. What are their needs? What can we do to help? The E is engaging in a fun, relaxed, non-anxious environment. This was not necessarily who we were several years ago. And we all know that our best decisions are made when everybody is relaxed, when they're looking at everything from a broad perspective, and it's a non-anxious environment in order to make those decisions. The A is really important because I think that's where you start really changing the way you do business. This involves the innovation of evolution and revolution, small changes or big changes. And it's asking the why not, and what if. The why is challenging people. When you say, hey, let's do this, and they say no, you start asking the why. Why do you say that? And then you start proposing different ways of doing business and say, why not? We just built, we have a new corporate office we call the Asbury Support and Collaboration Center. We built this 2.5 years ago. And when I built it, I took away all offices. I took away 30 offices when we built this office space, and I got a lot of resistance. But when I started asking why not, why not have an open collaborative space, we eventually all got there. And then the what if, that's the innovation. What if we did business differently? What if we were fully integrated and automated organization? What if we partnered with the Googles and the Microsofts? What could we do to enhance the lives of those we serve? And then the D is data, and Nick's going to talk a lot more about this. But I also know that data is so critical for our ability to move forward. Data was another tool in the toolbox I wanted to give to our managers. They do good jobs making decisions, but they were lacking the data to help support some of the informed business decisions. So we wanted to make sure data was available to them as another tool in their toolbox when it came to making decisions. So so before Nick gets into this slide, no, you're good, Nick. I wanted, one of the reasons we have IT today is because actually someone that I know is a speaker tomorrow, and I don't know if he's in the audience today or not, but it's Chip Burns. His foresight and thinking helped us really get into the position who we are today. I had the privilege of working with Chip for many years here at Asbury, and understand that because of his passion and commitment to Asbury, senior living, and the integration of IT, it has shaped who we've become today. So I certainly want to say, give a shout out to Chip for his hard work. And I also like to reference the senior housing news article that just came out in the last day or two about ThriveWell Tech, which is in the launch. And it sort of tells a great story about the years of building ThriveWell Tech and to what Nick has launched most recently. So I'm excited about that article. So Nick, I just wanted to throw that in there before you talked a little bit more about the slide.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, so what we're honored to have is a company that's really mature and been in the industry for 2 decades. So a lot of learning occurred, and Doug rightly so said, Chip created a company that is somewhat unique in the industry. There's not many like it. And I'll walk you through the journey of what we've done to arrive at ThriveWell Tech. It is a winning strategy to have an aligned group that can really understand the business strategy that Doug outlined. But it's also staying very current, meaning what we're doing today requires a framework that allows you to stay current. So if you look at the history of what was formerly known as the Asbury Group Integrated Technologies, very strong foundation in managing hosted environments. That's really the foundation of the company. And if you look back, there was a lack of EMR in the industry. The acute care industry obviously had meaningful use, so there was a catch-up that post-acute care had to do. So really the Asbury Group Integrated Technologies hosted applications and they mobilized EMR technology into the marketplace was a lot of the work that was being done. Hosting, looking from other industries, has now started to move towards either private cloud or public cloud. So when I joined in 2018, we really revisited our core business and we looked at, is hosting the future of what we want to be focused on? And as you looked at our pyramid, you see there's a lot of things beyond infrastructure that we want to focus in on that were distracting us. So we made a leap around 2019 to get out of hosting entirely and move to a private cloud partner. And we've started to make small steps into public cloud. The smaller steps have been via SaaS cloud and platforms that we can lean on our vendors to host. But overall, even our infrastructure, we are on a journey towards Azure and AWS. And we just think there's a lot of capabilities out in those public clouds that we can't generate ourselves. And it would be sad if we didn't leverage them. So our next set of journey will be taking us to public cloud. As we redesigned the service offering, really late 2019 and throughout 2020, which was a very, very unique year with COVID, we started to revisit all the assumptions of what the company would need to look like in order to support the future of senior living. So we know cloud enablement was one big area. And what I really tasked myself and my team is how do we get senior living operators to being in an arena or a structure where they can really experiment with emerging technologies and start working on things on the top of the pyramid as soon as they can and not worry about the bottom of the pyramid. So we realigned the team, really now a much more end user focused company. Data is a very big part of the strategy as we thought through ThriveWell Tech. We're building a very unique data instance. Doug had done really well for an institution of this size to have a legacy data MAR that organizes and collects data from all aspects of the business, and probably one of the early adopters of analytics and reporting. So I know Doug's been working from a very solid set of analytics for over a decade that have evolved and been grown. As we look forward with the launch of ThriveWell Tech, really we're looking to take that data structure and modernize it into what we call modern cloud data architecture in the form of data lakes. That will allow us to do a lot more with the data we have. So that's really how we're looking forward and future-proofing what we think is the future of senior living. Just a couple of other points I'd want to add here. We also redesigned our board, and we know there's a lot of very, very large groups. AARP is one of them that we can learn from. So we brought in the head of innovation from AARP to join us, and he's been with us for the past 2 years, helping really to guide us on what he sees the aging sector trending towards. We also have a very, very senior person, Joe Casper, who joined around the same time frame, who's really an innovator in healthcare. And we think healthcare and post-acute care definitely are starting to merge. So we felt having the right guidance from the company's board perspective also is going to bode well for us as we move forward.
Yeah, and Nick, I think that was a good key lesson learned. When I talk about getting out of the mindset of a CCRC business model, that included our board as well. I mean, you cannot run an IT company like you run a CCRC company. So by segregating the boards and having a board focused on information technology really helped accelerate and with the understanding of where we needed to go. And I think that was a key point in our growth in order to get to where we are today as well.
Thank you, Doug. So again, we'll go back to this slide. You'll see it scattered throughout our presentation. We really see senior living technology in this framework, and the maturity model really talks about the people, process, and the technology stack that you see in front of you. We're going to go through each of the slices of the pyramid per se, and really show how we've created a framework that as you adopt and your maturity increases, the things that you really see your board's pushing you to do become more viable, more of a reality.
Yeah. So I spent my first few years as CEO becoming very frustrated, as I shared earlier, trying to get our culture from that CCRC sole focus to a broader view, and to get it ingrained in our organization, the culture of innovation, and to get everybody as excited as I was around data and how that could truly be a game changer for us. And but what we had a lot of starts and stops along the way, and it was causing, again, as I shared earlier, frustration not only amongst the individuals and associates, but myself, the board. We weren't making the progress that I had hoped for. But what happened is, finally, with the help of Nick, he helped me, and it hit me that I wasn't asking the right question. He says, what was missing that created those roadblocks? What was missing that was creating the starts and stops and not allowing the organization to move forward? So this is where Nick came in and started help educating me on where we needed to be.
Yeah, so we looked at Doug's overall business strategy, made up of a very strong workforce, employer of choice, provider of choice, excellent services back to our residents, and obviously financial strength, as we are coming to a 100-year organization. It's a stewardship that's required, and financial strength is definitely a major strategy that's been planted in the foundation of Asbury. What we saw as IT was one of the missing pieces that now accelerates the three-legged strategy that Doug has, really, to some analogy, to make it a fourth leg of the entire pyramid that we looked at earlier on. So as we walk through the IT piece, if you keep relaying back to the overall business strategy, we started with an infrastructure that functioned. However, it wasn't future-proof, and investment was to some degree lacking. And I'll let Doug describe what he was living through earlier on.
Yeah. So once Nick helped me understand that the aligning of the structure of the strategies and the alignment of those organizations, that sort of was a light bulb that went off, and so I became excited. Like, okay, so now we've got our alignment of the strategies. I was convinced that we turned the corner, and just like that, we could become now an automated, integrated company. And all the data that we wanted, and everything that we needed to do, all the analyzation and the AI and the dashboards will be at our fingertips. But again, Nick comes into the case and sits down with me and says, well, you got to slow down there. We're not there yet. And he clearly identified and explained to me that we needed to build that right infrastructure to support this whole automation, integration, and data where I wanted to be. So it really helped me come to the understanding that not only did we need to have the right strategies aligned, now we had to step back and put in the right supporting infrastructure to move forward. And this was, this is a case, and when I'm talking to other CEOs and I'm out and talking to others in our industry, everybody wants innovation, everybody wants data, everybody wants the AI and to move the organization forward. But you can't put that in and have it sustainable if you do not have the right infrastructure. And we did not have the right infrastructure. We had it in pockets, but that even created further complications for us as an organization. So until we took the discipline and step back that Nick brought to us and said, look, we need to do the infrastructure in order to get to where you ultimately want to go up that pyramid.
Thanks, Doug. So this is a very symbolic picture. This is how we see the infrastructure. If these foundational pieces are missing, you're building a very weak bridge. And we see bridge really, if you think of the analogy of traffic, it's data traffic and how applications are facilitating that. So we did pause, and infrastructure projects, if not maintained and a catch-up is required, can take some time. So just to give some examples, we've just finished a full campus-wide Wi-Fi initiative that was really sitting on top of some of the earlier work we did on the network itself. What we've created is 4,000 access points that really cover a mass amount of space. If you think about a typical household that would have one access point, we've deployed over 4,000, and they've been partitioned into various networks. So obviously our SNF and medical centers are on a very closed off and medical grade Wi-Fi, and probably the weakest, or the largest network, but the least guarded, is the guest Wi-Fi. And then everything in between, we have resident Wi-Fi that's on their own network. We have office Wi-Fi, and we have system Wi-Fi. So the architecture of it was quite complex. It takes, ironically, a lot of wires to create a wireless system. And that's some of the foundational infrastructure that now has put Asbury in a very new position to look past infrastructure issues and move on to how data can move through the campus. So as we look at what we untangled, obviously there was a very long historical legacy architecture that we started to take down and replace. This picture represents, to some degree, until you untangle all of it and reorganize it, you cannot really build on top of it, because you don't know which wire you're pulling is going to have impact on which system. So we really reset Asbury, I would say, really well for the next 15 to 20 years in terms of how we've modernized that bottom layer, and we've created an organization that now leads you up the pyramid.
Yeah. So Nick, why don't you go to the next slide? We're down to like 5 minutes, and we got a few more slides to get. So let's keep moving. So we've got the strategy. Now we have the infrastructure. So now we have the plan to build the infrastructure. I say to Nick, so now we've got the infrastructure ready to get all the data. Now, which button do I push to get this report and to compare the different analytics that I wanted? And now by now, you all know what Nick's response was to me. He's like, not yet, man, we're not there. So we had no way to access all the data. So we had to integrate this data lake, which I'll let you talk about, Nick, real quick.
Yeah, so if you look at this application layer, really it's made up of systems that generate a lot of data. Maybe to some degree, an overwhelming amount of data, where if you're not organized well, it's hard to decipher. So as we look at the future of ThriveWell Tech, what we've organized our data strategy around is really a data lake, where we're facilitating collection of data at mass. Our systems already generate a lot of data. As we've brought networks to life across the campuses, we expect more and more data to be generated. Internet of Things data coming from remote patient monitoring, data from activity on campus. So this strategy, really, it's a well-designed framework that's available on Amazon, on Azure. We're adopting the broad strokes of it, but we're customizing it for the needs of senior living, and building workflows and analytics that get back to how senior living needs to operate. So what we're very excited about, we've started some really cool pilots, is really machine learning and automated learning and workflows that generate from data lakes that are well organized. I'll go through one more topic on data. What has happened over the past really 10 years, but more so in the last 5 years, is the cost of compute's come down dramatically. So we're able to compute more and more at a much lower cost. That's just across the board. And the public clouds really are facilitating that. But if you look at data itself, 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. As we look at what data is being created, when you look at analogies, 10,000 libraries of Congress of data are being created by US companies annually. If you stack that in CDs or disks, that would create 80,000 kilometers of stacked CDs of data being created annually. If you look at when did the data get created, we've created more data in the last 2 years than really has ever been created prior to those last 2 years. And it's growing at that same pace. Some of these everyday stats are very compelling. There's a billion footprints being created on Facebook or articles or posts. And interesting, if you think about it, 8 years worth of video gets created every day on YouTube. So just from those 2 data points, you can see the potential of data really accelerating as we move on. So what we thought through and put in place is how do you catch the data and leverage it to senior living's best use.
So I think the real quick part of this is, so as the operators were starting to use the data, they started having all these issues and ideas about what to fix and how to improve the quality of life. And so that's the whole integration of IT and having not Nick only sit at the senior living table, but also having local operators and IT sit with the local operations team in order to find ways to improve the quality of life for our residents.
Yeah, life safety. And we've now really, if you look at the progression, we've moved past the bottom 2 layers, and there's a lot of now things working in our favor that's allowed us to move up the pyramid. I'll skip this slide over. If we talk about emerging tech, I'll let Doug kick it off, but this is really the fun part where we've reached.
Yeah, and I think where this slide is going is that because of all the work, this last journey of ours over the last 5 years has really built the infrastructure and supporting and changed the culture of our organization, where we can get to the fun stuff now. We can start looking as the provider of choice of the Harvards and the Googles and the others looking to get in our industry and partner with those of us who are thinking differently to really help change the way society views aging. This is the point where we're at today.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, and just to give some real life examples, these are topics we were struggling to really focus in on. How do we do pilots? How do we collaborate with the right partners in industry? We're privileged as a system, and ThriveWell Tech's privileged to play that role. But as of today, we're collaborating on a machine learning initiative with Harvard for Asbury. We formed a formal alliance with AARP. We're starting to ingest some of the new startups that they are very excited about. And what we've seen, back to Doug's point, is we've been able to create a culture of innovation, because some of the work we're doing now that's technology focused, it's very exciting. And we've been able to engage wellness directors, campus EDs, the staff, even the residents, where there's a lot of excitement around the pilots that we're able to do now. But I think we were only able to get here with the bottom layers of that pyramid being well organized.
So in closing, it really comes down to some of the things we learned, that getting to where you want to be is not as simple as it sounds or looks. There's a significant commitment to the investment in our business, all business lines. You need to unlearn, think differently, and rethink how we operate. And most importantly, I think the last slide there, Nick, is this is IT. At some point in time, you can't wait for the perfect time to jump on. You just have to jump on the spinning merry-go-round and jump on and start. And that's the best way to do it. I think that's how we really, truly moved us forward. Yeah,
so quite a good video. That's kind of what it feels like. You don't know when to jump on, but once you're on, the example I'd give back to my prior experience, I did a lot of work for the banking sector. And if you look at that sector, not directly comparable to senior living, however, it was a brick and mortar business as it was formed. If you look at banking today, it's almost completely a digital business. And there were banks that jumped on and they started moving their digital footprint forward, what we call digital transformation, and those banks that didn't. And the banks that didn't now are really getting consolidated and maybe are looking back and saying technology may have allowed us to survive. So I think we see it fundamentally the same way. Technology is a big part of senior living as we move forward. So we've reached our presentation, the end of our presentation. We have now the second segment of today's session is really interactive Q&A. We've teed up some polling questions. They hopefully overlap to the presentation you heard. We welcome all questions from the audience, and I'll hand over to our polling team.
Hello again. So Doug and Nick, we've actually had about 5 or 6 questions that have come through already from the audience. So would you like to take those first before we move on to the polls?
Yeah, I think if we can organize them around the polls, that would be great too. But if they're unique, we can set the polls up to may trigger more questions.
Okay, so let's start off then. Elisa, do you mind putting the first poll up, which is on strategy? So the question is, does your organization have an IT strategy that is tied to the business strategy? And then if you just select your answer now. While you're doing that, I'm going to ask Nick and Doug, there's been a question, which is how do you coordinate the two strategies, so I presume IT and business strategy, if the business organization doesn't own the IT company?
Yeah, I'll jump in first for that. That is a critical question, and I will tell you it's one of the approaches that we made in terms of our strategic business partners. We don't look at whether it's IT, whether it's some of our other relationships with architects or Sodexo or others. We don't look for a vendor. We look for a partner, and I think you have to have that conversation very clearly up front to say, look, this is where I want to go, and this is and have them at the table with you, because if they are just there to report out quarterly, if they're there just to fix some problems, that's not going to evolve you to where you need to be. You have to have those partners at the table as you're discussing your strategy, so they're well aware of where you want to go, and then you have to hold them accountable to help you get there, but have them lay out a strategy with you to get where you ultimately want to go. And that a lot of times organizations keep strategy very close to the vest and only a few people around the table. The more expansive that strategy interaction and disciplinary process is, the better off you're going to be. So that would be my recommendation, is to have that conversation right up front and have them as a partner, not a vendor.
Yeah, what I would add to that is that what we call the virtual CIO seat, it's often missing, and it's very understandable in senior living. That's not a department or investment that's obvious to senior living operators. Doug is very fortunate. He built the ThriveWell Tech capability and then is offering it back to the industry. But to Doug's point, I would add to it, often we come across new customers in the marketplace that have a good IT team. That's a position of strength, and you can build on it by partnering the right way with the gaps that you feel are missing in your organization, and really fill out that virtual CIO seat.
Okay, great. Thank you, Doug and Nick. So the poll results have come up now. So we can see that the majority, 40%, are saying yes, but they're not tightly intertwined. 35% are working on it. 15% yes, we do, and they were built in parallel and highly intertwined and aligned. And then 10% not currently and don't have a plan to develop one. Doug and Nick, do you have any comments on those results there?
Good, Nick.
Yeah. I would say COVID last year really transformed, and we saw a lot of activity around mobilizing technology very quickly in order for operations to continue, in order for residents to stay connected. Networks became visible. The tail end, really the fourth quarter going into Q1, we've also seen additional cyber activity. So I think technology is on the forefront, especially over the last 12 months, on the forefront of the operator's mindset. We saw that accelerate. So I'm encouraged that there's a notion of, we do want IT to be part of the strategy, and it's very tough to intertwine it. And I know Doug's invested a lot of energy making sure technology is intertwined in the operations that he's running.
Doug, any comments? Sorry, go on.
Yes, no, that's fine. And I would say, well, kudos to the 15% that are intertwined. I think one of the things that we learned with our strategy as we brought the two together was that we were leaning on the IT company to drive innovation, to drive change, to drive alignment, where they were only a part of it. They needed a full system view. So once we positioned and had the understanding around our strategy that IT was supporting everything we did, but we weren't going to rely on them with the burden of driving everything. That's when we really started changing, and we went to listening to those closest to the process. And IT was bringing their expertise to the table to help us solve problems, to help us move forward. That's when those strategies aligned. That's when it really switched for us, when we realized we're not asking you to do this. We're asking you to support us and work together. So it's an important part to think about.
Thank you both. And there's another question here that I think is essentially about strategy, which is from Jack Cumming. So I was very impressed with Doug Leidig's description of the realization he had upon becoming CEO. Who were the mentors who most guided your development, and how did advisors help you reach your insights? And as a follow-up to that, how do you keep the technology focus on the primary business as opposed to technology as a separate industry in which people seek to build careers outside of the primary business? So,
all right,
Doug,
well, okay, I'll jump on the first part. Well, this was my first CEO role. I was always an operator before this. And so I had a lot to learn. So the board, fortunately for me, helped me and had an executive coach for one. But the board chair at the time was really instrumental in me. And our board is, for lack of a better term, not your typical not-for-profit board. A lot of outside individuals who, especially today, that are not from senior living. They're all professionals from across a continuum. And he pushed me to get outside senior living, and I started going out and talking to other industries, other organizations that I knew were using IT, and senior living is behind as a whole in our industry several years with IT. So I was out starting to talk to other companies and reading articles and visiting, saying, how are you using data? And so I knew that's what we needed to do. We didn't have to reinvent what we needed. It was already out there. It was just a matter of finding that and deciding where we needed to go and how it applied to senior living, and then implementing it. So that was the key. It was I didn't look internal, I looked external, and it was largely a board chair.
Great, thank you, Doug. Rick, do you have any comments on that one?
Yeah, I think to Doug's point, as he was saying, we're not reinventing. I came in from a very different place. I was really focused on digital transformation in banks. And then the last segment of my last role, I spent time on acute care. And I could see post-acute care and industry Doug's a leader in has a catch-up to do, and digital transformation hasn't happened. So I really saw an opportunity to make a difference in an industry that hasn't seen as much digital transformation as you'd see in banking or hospital systems. And I think that's it's really where there's a lot of good synergies between the ThriveWell Tech group. And we do run very autonomously, meaning Asbury is one of our cherished customers, but we have many other customers. And we're seeing the same challenge across the sector. So bringing in, to Doug's point, some of the outside learnings that have already happened has been a very good strategy. And in turn, I've brought in folks into my team that are from outside the industry.
Great, thank you, Nick. So another question on strategy now. This is from an anonymous attendee. Who do you recommend is involved in the building of a strategy, and what would their roles be? Should I give that to Nick first this time?
Yeah, I would say, it always starts with the man at the top. In our case, Doug, he's got a board that's advising him. It has to become something that you say, this is fundamentally has to become part of our operation. I would say senior leadership really building out a framework to intertwine IT into their operations. And we've got some very good frameworks that help you think through it. But really, it's around the business, trying to see what their business problems are, and really taking a serious look at how IT could solve it. So often when if you're managing HR, what are the typical challenges? Recruiting, workforce management, time and attendance, culture. If you look beyond that and say, how does technology have a role to play? You start then building a team where it's a push and pull. We're saying there are technology solutions out there that can help you, but the business then starts saying we need those solutions. And then when you implement them with real business ownership, as Doug's team is very entwined in our workflows, we're solving problems together. Back to Doug's point around IT doesn't always know what the real nature of the business is and what problem needs to be solved. The closer that interaction is, I think, the better the outcome is, meaning business sees technology solving a problem that they have day to day in their operation.
Thank you, Nick and Doug.
Yeah, what Nick said, but then I would emphasize real heavily the more diverse group you build to talk about strategy external to your industry, the better off you're going to be. We brought our business partners. I mentioned Sodexo earlier. They have senior living, but they're also a global company in 5 other different worlds. I asked them to bring their expertise and people in from their sports and leisure to their corporate governance and their corporate services departments. Our architect, he's a global architect. I said, what are other countries doing? Bring some architects that are working outside the US and bring them to the table with me. So the more diverse group, and we actually had friends of the people around the table that may be CEOs of other companies or leaders in the local community that aren't even touching in senior living, having them come in, because those who don't know senior living are asking some good questions that we should be asking ourselves to help us come up with that strategy. So I would recommend it and highly suggest the more diverse group you can, not touching your industry, around that table to talk about the future, and having that right mix, it just does a world of difference, makes a world of difference.
That's great, thank you. And then just one more question on strategy, I think, before we move on to the next poll, which is about infrastructure. So from Bob Davis, what do you look for in a virtual CIO, and how would the partnership work between the IT department and a virtual CIO?
I see a virtual CIO really has a seat at the table to study the business and the strategy of the business, and then really layer in the technology that's needed for that business to be successful. So, and I would also emphasize, not all senior living is the same. Everyone has a slightly different vision, slightly different operation, a different mix of care in their portfolio. Size becomes a factor. Large systems have complex IT challenges. Smaller organizations have challenges acquiring expensive technologies or complex technologies and implementing them. So they look for more point solutions. So I would see the role of the virtual CIO is really to partner with the management team and help build that 3 to 5 year map. And obviously, it's not a destination, it's a journey. So making sure you make the right stops on an annual basis in your journey, you prioritize correctly, and your investments are synergistic to the next year set of investments. That takes a lot of thinking, and it's not highly complex, but it's also not the job of the CEO or the CFO. They've got a full-time job. So looking at how IT needs to be intertwined, I would say that really is a function that the team should take in and allow that person to think correctly and make decisions on behalf of the system.
That's great. And Doug, do you have a comment on that one?
Yeah, Nick's the expert with virtual CIO. Fortunately, I don't have to look for one.
Great, thank you. So Elisa, is it all right for you to share the next poll, which is on infrastructure? Thank you. So it's infrastructure and investment and maturity. Is your organization keeping up with the required investments in IT infrastructure? And actually, while everybody's answering that, I'm going to ask Doug and Nick a question that's come through about infrastructure, which is, how are you using 5G to replace existing infrastructure. What are the recurring costs and are they significant? That's from Donny Friday. Can I put that one to Doug first?
Well, I'm going to punt to Nick because he deals with that on a daily basis. And when you talk listening to those closest to the process, you're getting a little out of my pay grade now. So I'm going to let Nick answer that one.
Thanks, Doug. No, it's a great question. 5G is now widely available. However, what I would say the backbone behind it is still yet to come. As we look at basically just to break it down into simple terms, today's infrastructure or traditional networks, they're built over wire, fiber wire, Cat7. It's a lot of wiring that goes throughout your buildings to generate the connectivity. So you can watch Netflix on site, you can transfer data between applications for the staff. You can use digital technologies fluently throughout the campus. So today, if you look at what's traditional and maybe a little looking in the rear mirror, a lot of wiring is required and a lot of physical infrastructure needs to be put in place in order for you to consume the data needs that are now emerging in senior living. Well, where we see 5G, and we've got one campus specifically that's in a very, I'd say, urban placement city surrounding it, a lot of businesses. 5G is now streaming over cell phone, but what we see 5G eventually becoming is that wiring. So you remove that entirely and you start relying on cell signal. We think the costs would be around OpEx. So today the costs really are centered around a large capital investment in that infrastructure, the wiring, the edge equipment that's required to bring in the signals from the street. And then you pay for the internet feed to come to you through a large provider. We see that shifting to where I think 5G will have a price point and there'll be ways to consume it, but it would be without any real physical infrastructure. So your devices start working. So there's a lot to think through as you implement 5G, specifically around security and how the throughput is. I think we're close. I would say we're probably 12 to 24 months away before you can start really putting 5G into good use cases. We're seeing it on just the recent area we've seen a very good leap to 5G is around resident phones. Cell technology now can be used in home, and it has been for quite some time, but it's robust enough where the end user experience is much better than what it was using a cell technology. We see that next phase could be the Wi-Fi is 5G. It's not Wi-Fi coming in from the street. So your network is strong enough on the 5G network where you don't really need a Wi-Fi infrastructure. I think the costs are still yet to be negotiated between the supply and demand, but they'll definitely move towards operating costs. So you'll be paying subscriptions, you'll be paying for the data used, versus today it's a combination of large capital investment combined with some OpEx. Hopefully that addresses the question.
Thank you, Nick. And so we've got the poll results up. So the majority, over 50%, 53%, say that they invest as needed. Then the next biggest category is people who do invest, but the investment fluctuates based on the strength of the financials at the time, which was 29%. We've got 18% saying, yes, we set aside a set percentage of our revenue to keep IT infrastructure current. And nobody said that investing in IT infrastructure was low on their priorities. So can I give that to Doug to comment on first for those results?
Sure, that's great because generally what we've seen in the past and talking to other organizations that's IT. Some of the IT costs are some of the first things cut when you're looking to try to make budget or you're having a reduced year. That people are not, they're keeping up with maybe the laptop, something, but not the infrastructure, the continuous investing of the wiring, et cetera. So that's great news. I'm glad to see those numbers.
Nick?
Yeah, and I'll just add to when we talk through infrastructure, really it's down to the laptops hardware that you have. That also needs to be continuously rethought because what may have worked 3 years ago will not work today based on the amount of functionality that we have in our applications and the amount of data that we consume. So it's very encouraging to see it's not a low priority. What I would also add is there is now, as we digitize the industry, and it's happening as we speak, there's need to protect the data. And I think investments in cyber infrastructure and cyber overall is now becoming forefront of a lot of the strategy discussions we're discussing. We're actually putting it ahead of everything and really creating a cyber designed architecture as we move forward, because I think cyber is now, as it was for other industries, a very key topic to address.
That's great. Thank you both. And so one more question on investment before we move on to data, which is going to be, quite a nice follow on from what we've just been discussing about cyber. So the question is, what is a typical investment required to ensure that we have maturity regarding infrastructure?
So I would say there's, depending on where you are from this poll, it looks very encouraging that people generally trying to keep up to date and not allowing things to lag. We generally see at the high end in acute care, and this is the hospital system, spending upwards of 7, 8, 9% of their revenues on IT. For senior living, obviously, there's a difference. We definitely think 3 to 5% of your revenue is not a outrageous number to think through, and that would be broken into services, the people that you have on staff, the costs of those people, the software ecosystem that you use, subscriptions for good software don't run cheap, but you're going to see ROIs from investing in good software. And then on a recurring basis and maintenance basis, capital expenditure on hardware, like we discussed, physical hardware on the plant, as well as hardware in terms of laptops, video equipment. I mean, there's a lot of categories, but I would say 5% is a very good. If you're spending 5% a year, you're probably in the median. You're doing a good job.
Great, thank you. And Doug, do you have any comments on that?
No, I concur. I think that's going to keep you where you are, and maybe a little bit of advancement. Obviously, if you can do more, that's the better way to go. And we try to cycle that through too. Every couple of years, we try to maybe make it a 7 or 8% number versus the 5, just as we continue to try to increase. But that's mixed ranges are good.
Great, thank you both. And now we'll move on to the data poll, if that's all right, Elisa, because I know we do have about 2 or 3 questions about data. So great, thank you. So the poll question is, for applications and data, where do you rank your organization's maturity progression as it relates to business applications and data? So the poll options are up. If you could choose your option. I'm going to ask Nick and Doug a question that came through earlier, which was, where does governance for technology live within Asbury and ThriveWell? Specifically, which organization is driving data governance? If I can put that one to Doug first.
Sure. That's with the group that Nick was referencing earlier, the Asbury Group board, which is our for-profit company. That board really drives that. But now our parent company, because we own the ThriveWell now, they get general reports. We're doing a big cybersecurity update to them here at the next board meeting. So they're involved, but it's really down with Nick and that advisory board that he works with.
And typical frameworks, just to add to what Doug said, for senior living of all sizes, really, we try to check in at least once a month to provide an update, and that should be a check-in as you do with any department. What's the state of IT? What's the investment? What's the analytics coming out of IT? That's more, I'd say, tactical. We see compliance playing a role, so there's obviously always a compliance committee. We've woven cyber into that arena, so I would recommend at least a quarterly meeting to talk about cyber as a topic as part of your compliance. And then annually, we would say the budgeting process for the following year is built over a 3 to 5 year plan, and you spend time at least once a year really scrubbing what your future investments are for the next 12 months.
Thank you. And so another question on data is, where is Asbury's data lake living? The question is in AWS or Azure is suggested. Can I pass that on to Nick first?
Yeah, so we have we have a legacy traditional data warehouse, which is in Microsoft technology, SQL Server. We've started building the future state in AWS. I'm kind of agnostic between AWS and Azure on their overall maturity, meaning they're both great products. However, we see the future state capabilities we want to leverage, machine learning, AI, fast data ingestion, streaming data. These are really well put together in AWS. So we've started to build the foundation data architecture in AWS. And then obviously, as we populate the lake, we'll migrate out of a SQL Server environment.
Thank you. And Doug, do you have anything to add to that one?
No, you're learning the Nick's a professional there.
So yeah, and the next question on data is, what are the recommendations from a staffing perspective to successfully build a successful application layer? So who else of you would like to answer that one?
Go ahead, Dick, you talk about your staffing, I'll talk the other side.
Yes, I see application layer really, it's back to what I said. We are really hell-bent on this concept that the business owns the system. It's one of the tools that they're using to become successful in their department or their overall piece of the business. So definitely the staffing would be, never underestimate the time and energy it takes the business owner, the head of a department, to focus in on technology and have someone, if it's not them themselves, making sure the technology they use is being maintained to the standard of their business, how the business is changing. That will lead to a very good partnership or good outcomes when you partner with the right IT resources. Those could be brought in as needed. They could be part of your team. But application system maintenance, it's often thought of as, oh, we'll take care of that system when it breaks. If you wait that long, you're really looking at rebuilding the application, going back to square one. I would say you have to invest from the business side and from the IT side, some recurring energy around maintaining the systems that you have.
Yeah, and I agree. And having somebody focused on that, you cannot throw these type of things on somebody else's plate, whether it's your maintenance director, your executive director, somebody. This has to be dedicated because it is such an important role. It cannot just be thrown on because it will not move forward as fast as it needs to. And there's a lot of other little things that can happen along the way. Like Nick said, when you unplug one wire, you may end up unplugging a lot. So having that expertise at that table and drive that process is a critical investment to make.
Well, thank you both. And let's have a look at the poll results now for applications and data. So there is a clear answer here. So 64% said that they're working on strategies to move towards a more integrated environment with cloud-based applications. 29% said they're heavily focused and investing time and resources into staying highly integrated and on the latest version of applications with tight mappings of technology to use case, mostly in cloud. And 7% said we have legacy on-premise platforms that work for us and we're not exploring anything new. There was nobody who said they didn't have a large need for applications and data in their operations. So Doug, any comments on that?
I think it just validates what we all know, that data is going to rule the world moving forward, and it's going to be integral, and not only in the way we operate, but how we partner and work with others. So I think that's it's good to see.
Nick, any comments?
Yeah, no, I think this is in line with what we are seeing. Obviously, very encouraging that 29% are on their journey to cloud. What we've learned looking back is we're not going to be able to keep up with technology changes, and they really allow you to adopt changes as they're happening if you're working out of the cloud. On-premise is really, I think, now a thing of the past, or on very, very behind the scenes technology may be functional.
And I think that's true. When we truly stabilized our platform and the environment we work in daily is when we went to the cloud, because there were so many upgrades, there were so many changes within just all the various softwares we were doing. The stability of the whole platform really just increased when we went to the cloud. So it's a great move. I'm glad to see that others are doing that.
Great, thank you. Well, so we have about 12 minutes left and 2 polls. So I'm going to ask Elisa to put up the next question, which is about wellness, social engagement, and resident-centered technologies. Do you offer and facilitate the use of technology for your residents? For example, telehealth, remote patient monitoring, social engagement, or virtual reality? And while everyone's answering those questions, I am just going to quickly ask Doug and Nick to comment on a question we've had through the chat from Alan Campbell, which was, please, could you give some examples of the emerging technology pilots that you have alluded to? So should I start with Nick for that one?
Nick.
Yeah, we've got one that's very exciting. We've partnered up with Harvard really to take their experience in the data and the machine learning team, and it's sponsored by NIA and NIH as a forward-thinking R&D type project. So what we're doing on the ThriveWell Tech side is we're developing the biosensing device, really a way to take vital signs in a streaming format, what we typically see in a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, but we're designing and implementing our own, a custom version in collaboration with the Harvard expertise to add things like temperature, which typically you don't see in a wearable because it's very hard to get a good reading because your outside body temperature is very different from your actual inside body temperature. So the firmware and the technology we need to calibrate it is being built into this watch. We're fairly close to making it resident live. We're gonna have 60 residents wear the watch, and what we're hoping to do is have very early detection of deterioration in vital signs. If you combine the streaming data coming from the watch with the EMR record or basically the health record of the individual wearing it. We're fortunate we've been able to leverage the Brainiacs up in Boston, and they've got data on pre, during, and post COVID cases, so that we're able to leverage how vital signs change through that journey. And we're hoping that we can develop a lot of additional use cases on that platform, including falls. We see geosensing and having the watch explain activities. So there's a lot of excitement around that project. And we're really now at the cusp of another initiative where we're looking at remote patient monitoring, but without really any what we call passive remote patient monitoring. That's in collaboration with our ARP relationship. Technologies move so far forward where there's devices now available where you can leave them as a passive device in the room and it will gauge your activity, your falls, your heart rate. So we're starting to plug those into our environment and do pilots to see how those devices can change the data we see in operations.
And I'll just throw one in there because I know we're up against that, but we're doing stuff with some very disease specific. And what's interesting is through our foundation, we have people who are very personally invested in these. So we're doing something at one of our campuses on with Parkinson's disease and virtual reality and the keeping the brain health, all those type of things that go with that. So there's a lot of opportunities out there to pilot. Again, we're not inventing this. We're just partnering with people that have the technology and they're trying to say, hey, does this have, is this applicable? And they're using us and our residents benefit directly from it. So there's some pretty neat projects out there.
They do sound really exciting. And we've got one question more on sort of social, I suppose, on the wellness and social engagement aspect while we're looking at this poll, which is how do we successfully integrate residents into our technology vision? So if I can put that one to Doug first this time.
Very carefully, because one of the things you got to do, and the residents we serve today they're learning technology. But what we have to do is we have to create a technology vision that's going to those that are 60 years old or 50 years old. They're going to want it when they move into one of our communities, or how we can help support them in their own home. You go back 20 years ago when the continuing care retirement communities, what CCRCs, when we built wellness centers, pools and weight rooms, residents that lived there were just up in arms. I'm not going to use that, but we're not building it for you. We're building it for the next generation. And had you not done that, you'd be so far behind. So we view technology the same way. You bring them in as part of the process, There are some that are very passionate about it and are willing to look forward. So you just have to find the right balance, but it is vital that they're at the table to have their views and perspective.
Thank you, Doug. And Nick, any comments on that?
Yeah, in the pilots, we're doing, to echo Doug's commentary, I think advisory meetings, we're including residents in advisory so they can really give their opinion, their voice, and it really, I would say, allows pilots to be successful post the go live decision. Pilots are a critical part too. We believe in piloting, failing fast, experimenting with residents heavily involved. So if things are successful, residents have already kind of bought in and they see the value of it.
Great, thank you both for answering that. So we have 6 minutes left, so I'm just going to recap over we've got the results in now for the wellness poll. So again, an overall majority, we've got 64% saying that they're starting to introduce resident-centered technology, but still at the early stages. Then 21% saying no, we don't currently use resident-centered technology but would like to start, and 14% saying yes, we have multiple programs are available to all residents and we promote the use of emerging resident technology at our campuses, and then nobody saying that no, we do not have current plans to explore resident-centered technology. So what we'll do now is, if it's okay, Elisa, could you put up the next poll, which is on innovation? And then I know there are a few general questions which I'm hoping we'll have time to get through. So I'm going to ask this one now, which is from Jim DeLapper. How do you drive early and continued adoption? I'll put that one to Nick first, if that's okay.
Yeah, adoption really comes at the tip of our pyramid in terms of we've reached a state where we're maturely bringing emerging tech into our environment. Adoption, I think it goes back to the topic around system ownership and buy-in at the business level. So the staff and the operation itself are embracing that technology. That's one. And going back to the pilot, the residents have seen the value of it. I think the residents' families, it's great if you can include some input from family members so they see, okay, this is new technology that's available at this campus, and this is how it's going to help our loved one who lives there. I think those are some of the best practices.
Great, thank you, Nick. And Doug, your comment on that one?
I would add culture, right? You have to have the right culture. But one of the things, we had some fails with like robotics, and we had a robot we were using. It just did not take off because people didn't really see the benefit of that. So what we found is we found some smaller pilots that had positive results. So we started changing people's beliefs through their experiences. So we had a few experiences, we had some little wins, which then built sort of a snowball effect. It started building momentum. Now people are starting to ask for more, but it has taken a while and it's taken some failures to get there. So you have to fail to get the adoption, as you also have to have some positive experiences to change people's belief that truly innovation will affect the way they work or the lives that they lead.
Great, thank you both. And so just having a look at the innovation results now. So the question was, how prepared is your organization to experiment with new technologies that are yet to be proven mainstream solutions? Now, this one's interesting because it's a bit split between the different answers. So we've got 29% say we plan annually to perform at least one significant pilot with funding, planning and resourcing to ensure pilots can be brought to a conclusion, and about the same percentage saying we from time to time try new innovative technology but do not have a formal pilots process. A lower percentage saying we very infrequently test new technology in our environment, and the same percentage, 21, again saying we've not conducted any pilots in the last 24 months. So that result was a lot more evenly split between the four answers. Doug, would you like to comment on that?
I'm not surprised with the answer because it's tricky because you have to figure out. Yeah, I like the one that people have funded for them, through foundations or grants, because when we talk about budgets and not-for-profits especially are looking for every dollar to make sure that they're reinvesting in the staff. Innovation doesn't bubble up to the top, but how do you do that? So it's good that you're doing it, but it's not unusual from what we're hearing in the industry about it being split. That you got to find the right partners to help you do it.
And Nick, any comments?
Yeah, I think it's a very tough thing to reach that emerging tech arena and build that into your game plan. So I think it speaks to the industries at various stages. And what I would recap from today's session is really the bottom layer, the second layer, the third layer. You want to remove as much friction as possible on your day-to-day operations, take the frustration away from the employees and the residents' perspective. And then those topics allow that energy to be spent on emerging tech. So you really want to remove the barriers, which are the day-to-day operational technology challenges, in order for emerging tech pilots to have a lot of energy around.
Well, thank you both. I want to make sure that I give you a few minutes to wrap up. We have only got 2 minutes of the session left. So I know there are questions from Donny Friday and Bob Davis that we haven't answered. I have got a note of those. So what I'll do is put those to Doug and Nick after the session. So Doug, Nick, do you want to give your concluding remarks for today?
Do you want to take that, Nick?
Yeah, I'll just advance the slides because we did have a recap of. So we basically today covered, I think it's a unique session, a live working example with real data points around where we've reached, where we started. So we think governance is a big component of this, but it starts from the top. So best practices around building that roadmap are hopefully what we're leaving behind. Developing that technology strategy, it's complex, and a lot of businesses think of it as a sidebar topic. Integrating it, hopefully we're able to give some highlights of how we've done it, and it wasn't a simple path. It's a very concerted effort on Doug's part and the team that Doug leads, working with the IT group. And then now we're seeing the fruit of integrating the two strategies. And I think we've started to remove a lot of the friction that would have distracted us to getting to the top of that pyramid. Now those distractions have been kind of alleviated and the friction's been taken out. We're seeing ourselves being able to move faster. And I think it was, to Doug's credit, a vision that he's had for a very long time. And he really changed his organization to allow technology to be welcome as part of the evolution of his company.
Doug, anything to add?
That sounds good. We're right at 2 o'clock, so I don't want to run us over. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about our journey.
Thank you both. Thanks also to Gary, who was with us at the start. Thanks everyone for being really engaged with those poll results. That was really interesting to get a benchmark of where everyone's at. Hopefully you will have responded to our feedback poll. I can see many people have. Please do make use of the networking platform to connect with other key players in the space from 14:30 today, and it will be open until 1900 EDT this evening. Thank you very much, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the Senior Living Transformation Summit tomorrow at 12:30 for our Executive Technology Roundtable on the question of what does the future of technology and innovation look like in senior care. We hope to see you there. Thank you.